Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa.
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score! And we'll see you next week, but until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Whoa, that's new. Richard, you absolute badass, you. We got a new intro. Matt Connor's still gone. Josh Brisco is joining us, but wow, I'm flattered right now. That was one of the coolest intros I have seen. Richard, shout out to you. This is the Arrowhead Addict podcast, the Tuesday edition. Again, Matt Connor is gallivanting around Europe. Should be back for next Tuesday's show. A man who was just back from gallivanting around Europe is Josh Brisco. Brisco, how you doing, my man?
I'm great. I had a great time gallivanting. The intro is absolutely choice. I'm honored to be here for that big reveal. And I feel like between you and me and Richard in the comments, I think we might find a few things to talk about today. So I'm in a good mood.
Just a couple of things. I know Chiefs news, it's a little slow going on right now. Not a ton to talk about, but you and I were obviously at a very cool event, Marquez Valdes-Scantling's charity event, Humble Beginnings. We were there kind of live calling the softball game. We're going to get to some of that. We're going to talk about Chris Jones, his absence from mandatory minicamp, what that means. But before we go any farther, got to give a shout out to Caesars Sportsbook. If you go to Caesars Sportsbook and use code ARROWFUL, get your first bet on Caesars up to $1,250 on any sport. Offer is only available for new customers who are 21 plus and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check the episode description for the full terms of the offer. Again, Caesars Sportsbook, code ARROWFUL, and first bet on Caesars up to $1,250 on any sport.
You and me were built for a world where we don't need artificially enhanced disclaimers, because that was incredible. That was great.
Thank you. Yeah, I always laugh when we're doing sports talk radio. Brisco also works for Sports Radio 810. He does the midday shows, the Jason Anderson from 10 until 2. It's about the best time slot. You don't have to wake up too early, and you still have the rest of your afternoon. Quite frankly, when you were gone, I was jealous because I filled in for Brisco a couple of times, and I go, man, this is the life.
Yeah, easy. Just everything about it. Just roll the ball out there and, just try to make sure you're at work by, 9-ish or so. Yeah, it's not bad.
But I was going to do one of those ad reads for one of the betting sites. I forget if it was Caesars or BetMGM, whatever it was.
Probably Caesars, because Caesars is the one that you're talking about here today. So let's say it was Caesars.
Caesars is the GOAT. So we were talking Caesars, and I did the ad read, and I was thinking I was going to do all the disclaimer, but no, or the producer hit the button with this sped up intelligence. I just looked back, and I'm like, you took my thing.
Yes, I wanted to say, all of the places you can call if you need some assistance in the betting world. Yeah, it's the disclaimers are part of the challenge and part of the fun if you're, blessed or potentially cursed by this sort of speed talking ability we seem to have.
And before we go any further, Angry Drunken German in the chat says first flat screen TV he ever saw was in this squatter?
In the squatter.
In the
squatter. Think about it.
At Caesars Sportsbook. So shout out Caesars for having the first flat screen TV that Angry Drunken German saw.
If you read the rest of the comment, you're going to figure out what a squatter is, and also a nice little Damon Heward shout out. So I don't want you to bail on that comment too early.
The Damon Heward-led Chiefs were playing the Dolphins, and I was watching from the throne. It was brilliant. That's great, man.
Stu loves a good euphemism for a potty. So I'm really surprised that squatter did not ring any bells for you.
No, I call it the pisser. That's kind of, hit the head.
Are we allowed to curse on this show?
In a little bit.
You've already said a couple of PG words so far, and I'm trying to recalibrate to what the standard is here.
By the way, if you're looking at what's going on behind me, it looks like I'm in a jail. No, my girlfriend is redoing my podcast studio. So I apologize if it was any bit of echo. I'm sure there's probably a little bit more than normal, but it's getting redone. She's doing it for me while I'm on a golf trip, so I can't complain. I mean, having girlfriends are pretty cool.
I wish you'd redesign your mustache, but I guess we can keep waiting for that.
How dare you? All right, Chris Jones misses mandatory minicamp. We know why. He wants a new contract. This is no surprise to anyone. But what's your take on Chris Jones missing mandatory minicamp?
He almost has to do it just as a guy who's looking for a new deal that has 3 days of very light leverage here. It doesn't bother me or concern me at all. I thought it was kind of interesting that the Schefter tweet today included the little parenthetical of something along the lines of the Chiefs who are interested in giving Chris Jones a contract this offseason. Everything so far, I think, has seemed very amicable and very like, hey, we're working it out. We're gonna get there by the time the season comes around. Hopefully figure that out before training camp is in full swing. It doesn't make any sense from the be at minicamp either, from just like a what makes sense for you, the human being side of things. Because look, like the idea of him, skipping a whole season for an extra couple $1 million per year in average annual value is a completely different conversation. But right now, what Chris Jones is looking for isn't necessarily just a raise. It's the long-term security that comes with a multi-year deal with a lot of guaranteed money. He shouldn't be out at minicamp right now because crazy stuff happens sometimes. And by the time training camp comes around, maybe that conversation's a little bit different. But I hope, and I don't want to say I believe because I'm not sure I do, but I hope very much that by the time training camp arrives, Chris Jones is there day one with a big smile and a big Monopoly money kind of bag full of cash, because it seems like it should be as easy to get done as a handshake at this point. There will be a lot of other factors, but it seems like Chris Jones's camp has been pretty reasonable, and I think the Chiefs have been level-headed as well. I don't think we're ramping up for Tyreek Hill 2.0 here.
No, it doesn't feel like Saquon Barkley and the Giants. It doesn't feel like Stephon Diggs and the Bills, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit later. Shelby Myers says, didn't he miss things last time he was up for a contract too? And I believe he did miss as well. So
he missed mini camp and then was back for training camp. That was the setup there. And I think he got, this is when I need a fact checker as to when that deal got signed. But he did miss mini camp the last contract time too.
I wanted to say it was July 14th. It was around that time frame. It was a week or two into July. There's no time.
That could have been that would have been just before training camp, right? Because it was Mahomes' deal, then Jones's deal, and then camp started, I think.
Correct. So again, no reason to panic. I'm not worried. We know why Chris Jones is holding out. Again, it's not like the Bills and one side is saying the Bills, where's Stephon Diggs? And then his agent saying, oh no, he's there. And
I could talk about this for an hour. This is the story today that has really taken my my imagination by storm.
Who would have thought a team that struggles to win in the playoffs is already imploding?
Shocking,
who would have thought a team that gave a $120 million contract to a 34-year-old edge rusher might have some issues?
By the way, when did you say you thought Chris Jones signed his last deal? What day?
July 14th was what I thought.
Yeah, July 14th. I just wanted to give you the credit for absolutely no scoping that, because that's really impressive.
Well, I have good memory on certain things, but don't ask my girlfriend because then I have the worst memory ever. I just think of how it works. I when it comes to sports and dates and random numbers, I'm really good. When it comes to actual useful knowledge of things, zero idea. Like zero idea when my cousin's wedding is, and I just got off the phone with him.
Or like just as a different example, like forgetting when my wedding was going to be several times after you had an invitation already, like that kind of, just for a random example.
Just completely out of nowhere. It's random, very random.
Yeah, totally random.
But my opinion is Chris Jones, his camp is waiting for Quinnen Williams to get a deal done. I think Quinnen Williams is saying, hey, whoa, let's wait for Chris Jones to get a deal done. The one thing I will say is I don't know if Chris Jones and the Jets or Quinnen Williams and the Jets have the same rapport that the Chiefs do with Chris Jones. That seems to be the biggest difference maker. But in your estimation, is that the holdup here?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it could be, and I don't think it has to be, if that makes sense. Because I do think that the Chiefs could get a deal done with Chris Jones before Quinnen Williams' deal is done in New York. And it would just be somewhere in that I want to be the second highest paid defensive tackle in football. That Aaron Donald money is a little bit of thanks for being here money. And somebody, I cannot remember who it was that used the turn of phrase. It was someone on the zone, and I'm sure it could have, I don't know, it could have been anybody. But somebody essentially said that the Rams were paying the please don't retire tax for Aaron Donald as well. And I thought that was a really good line, so much so that I couldn't remember who said it. But I thought that was a really good line where the Chiefs are not necessarily at that place with Chris Jones. And this is, I'm going to kind of spin this off into a way bigger thing that kind of frustrates me sometimes, but I think there's a little bit of truth to on this case. When fans talk about like taking the hometown discount or taking the pay cut or doing what you can to, to help the team and all of that, a lot of that, I really understand where it comes from, but you're also talking about guys who have really short careers, making great money by and large, but very short careers nonetheless. Juju Smith-Schuster is still a very young man, but he has the knees of a much older one in a sport that does not allow you to have an old knees, right? So like Juju might want to get that extra couple $1 million because it's worth a little change of scenery for. Point being, I think more often than not that sort of discourse does a disservice to players.
Yeah.
But for Patrick Mahomes, and then some extension to Chris Jones and the rest of the Chiefs as well, taking a little less money to be on a perennial contender. And again, this is really more specifically for Mahomes, which you not asked about, but specifically for Mahomes, it makes sense for him to say, yeah, no, what is Travis Kelce worth to Patrick Mahomes? This is a false dichotomy here, I guess, to be like, hey, so if Patrick Mahomes could literally just take $5 million out of his paycheck and just scoot it over to Travis Kelce to get him to play for a year longer or to stick around for one more instead of going for one last season in Detroit or something really depressing, I think he would do that. Not that he should have to, but it's the cost of a salary cap sport. And for Patrick Mahomes, the legacy and the rings and then the endorsements that follow, like it makes business sense, not just good vibes, home team sense, right? And so for Chris Jones, I think there's something a little bit similar there where he, with the Chiefs and another Super Bowl ring, will be a Hall of Famer. Adam Teicher of ESPN was on the zone with us today, and he said, and I didn't expect this from Teicher because he's just kind of a prove-it guy in a lot of ways, I think, right? Teicher said if Chris Jones never played another down, he would vote for him as a Hall of Famer. And I think he's right. I think it's a good take. And I'm not surprised that Adam has good opinions. But I was like hearing it out loud from someone who's covered the team for a really long time was a little bit jarring to me. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting now that you say that. And I think he should be regardless. But if Chris Jones plays one more year with the Chiefs, they gasp, lose an AFC championship game. And then he kind of goes and toils making a little more money for teams that aren't having playoff success. I think people are going to forget about him when right now he is at the peak of his influence. Like people acknowledge now, this offseason, I think is the one where he has gotten the most shine nationally. So there's some value to that as well. Again, we're like 14 layers deep. Maybe it's just June seeping in. But I think the elements of that are pretty interesting. You know what, Stu? I'd love to know what you think.
I think a deal gets done. I think his legacy is something that he wants to protect. I understand players, for the most part, always say, I want to be here. They want to spend their entire career with one team. Players say that because if they don't and they go somewhere else, they say, hey, I wanted to stay here. It was the team's fault, not mine. Some of it is good PR. But with Chris Jones, I think there's more to it. I do think there's a part of him that believes in what the Chiefs are doing. He understands how good the organization is, and he might not be treated the same way at every single organization, right? You hear how good from the top down, from the Hunts down, how well run the Chiefs organization is.
The best endorser of that I have heard in years was Frank Clark this week.
Yeah, and I think it's a very, very good point. And I understand where Chris Jones is coming from. He was actually valiantly trying to get Frank Clark to stay here. It didn't happen. He got a contract that I think, quite frankly, the Chiefs were not going to offer. I think the Chiefs are going to offer somewhere along the Carlos Dunlap type of contract, the 1 year, $3 million. He gets 5.5 up to 7.5. I get it. And he was going to be the Dunlap role. I mean, we'll see. Early in the year, maybe Frank Clark would have got more run with FAU being a rookie and what's going to happen with Charles Omenihu, right? Who knows how that's going to officially play out. So maybe Frank Clark would have gotten some more run early in the year. But again, you can't blame Frank Clark for basically getting double what he was going to receive here in Kansas City. Chris Jones, end of the day, I think understands the value of this organization. His legacy seems like a dude who does want. He didn't hold out when he could have his first time around. I don't think he does this time. I think a deal gets done and you're probably looking around anywhere from 3 to 4 years. And I'm going to say 26 mil per year is probably about the number I'm looking at. If Quentin Williams gets 25, you're probably looking at 26 per year.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about the probably closer to the 24, 25 range, kind of before this offseason and all the corresponding dominoes. And I don't have the average annual value charts up ahead of me, but or in front of me. But I do think also, I think average annual value matters, but in a lot of ways that ends up being kind of the vanity number out of a contract, right? Like you're going to hear a lot of average annual values where that last year's $900 million. Like, wait a second, how does that work? That doesn't seem possible. Well, because it's not guaranteed. And so I think for Chris Jones, what will ultimately be the case, and again, I don't even actually know what this number would be right now, but I think that he'll end up having the most guaranteed money in a single deal for a defensive tackle. I think he could, because I don't know what Aaron Donald ended up being, but it wouldn't have been as high because it wasn't as long of a deal at that age, I think. So I'm going to do some Googling.
So I know Jeffrey Simmons was the highest AAV outside of Aaron Donald for because I've actually looked this up for a good amount, do this exact same conversation. He was at 23.5 AAV, right? Jeffrey Simmons. We expect Quinnen Williams to surpass that. We're probably looking at 24 to 25. That's my best estimation for Quinnen Williams. And then I expect Chris Jones to just surpass that. And that's the number of 26 million I came to. End of the day, 24 to 28 isn't that big of a deal. The Chiefs will find a way around it. Chris Jones, you have to keep. If you're like, I'll give Chris Jones 25, but I'm not going 26 and he walks, you're going to look back and say, no, come on now. Chris Jones on this defensive line is making this defensive line second in sacks last year, a good pressure rate. You take Chris Jones off, what is this defensive line? Average at best. At best. And that to me is part of it, right? When you start kind of ticking around $1 million or $2 per year, you go, this starts to feel really silly. Like where are we going to draw this line, right? But I think what ultimately matters is that you have to have a combination of correctly identifying your elite players. And like we're saying nice things about Frank Clark, and I think his legacy in Kansas City will be a good one, and rightfully so. 2 championships and great playoff runs. God bless him. But they traded for and paid Frank Clark to be a blue chip elite edge rusher, and that didn't come to fruition in a regular season. It did in the playoffs, so everyone's happy. But that's what ends up really really punishing you as a team. Eric Berry and Justin Houston. Injury offset, but injuries made them paid like elite players, and then that contract became an albatross, right? So all of that to say, Chris Jones is a blue chip elite player. You just want to make sure you're not paying him elite money when the drop-off eventually comes, but I think we've got some time on that. And then here on Spotrac, for guaranteed money at signing, Daron Payne is now number 1, $55 million guaranteed. 59 of it is practically guaranteed per Spotrac's mechanisms here. And then Simmons is at about 48 million guaranteed at signing. Aaron Donald's at 46.5. The practical guarantees, Aaron Donald is at 95. I think that's basically because like they're saying, hey, we will either pay you or you will retire, but we're not going to cut you, I guess. I don't know the every intricacy of that deal, but most of it's up at this point, I think, right? Yeah.
And then Dexter Lawrence has $60 million in practically guaranteed money. So that to me would be my guess. Whatever the AAV ends up being and the structure will be fascinating. But my new take here, revealed exclusively, first and foremost on the Arrowhead Addict podcast, is that I think Chris Jones sets a guaranteed at signing record for defensive tackles. And I think the Chiefs should be tickled to give it to him.
Hey, I'll give you the Sterling Holmes endorsement, baby. I'll stamp it. There's a stamp of approval.
Stamp me.
The JB and SH stamp of approval.
I think we can rebrand that, but I still like it.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. That's really too long. Well, come on. It's you and me. Of course, it's going to be long worded.
The Brisco Holmes stamp of endorsement.
KCDC, you're saying 26 on a 1-year deal. No. I was saying 26 AAV on a 3 or 4 year deal. So probably a 4-year deal with the Chiefs having an out after 3 would be the most likely situation.
The other funky thing here is that this isn't a case with like a lot of other contracts where you're giving a long-term deal to a guy who's got like a $4 million cap hit in the first year of it. And so you got to backload it. Chris Jones is holding up $28 million in cap space this year. I saw that comment also, and they could still backload it, right? Like they could still say, we're going to just have more money now. We because any money they don't spend this year will roll over. And so I don't know that there's a logic to like, yes, we want to pay $25 million of it now and have lower cap hits the rest of the way, because that's what restructuring is for and prorated bonuses. And we could do a month-long show on little salary cap intricacies, but
and a lot of it is, how much does Clark Hunt want to actually front? How much is he saying, let me pull it out of my Scrooge McDuckian vault and say, hey, we're paying this now versus later?
Yes. And so the money will, and the guaranteed money that will go into escrow, that's out of the vault right away. And the prorated signing bonus is out of the vault right away and going straight to them in cash. So it's just kind of interesting that this is not a situation where they would have to backload it. They could pay him $25 million in 2023, 24, and 25 if that ends up being the deal, right? And kind of smoothing that out some and get a little space. Or they could backload it. They could pay nearly 30 this year if they want. I don't think they will. I think they'll backload it. But it is a little bit more flexibility for the Chiefs.
I always love the prime Frank Clark and Denver jokes. They're always great. Good news is Denver doesn't play in the postseason, so they'll never see prime Frank Clark. I love that. I love that.
It's a good joke.
What do you make of Frank Clark going to the Broncos? I was surprised, and not necessarily surprised that he chose. Yes, I'm surprised he chose the Broncos because he does seem like a big Chiefs guy, right? Like, some players like Juju Smith-Schuster didn't really have that loyalty to Kansas City. It felt like Frank Clark had a little bit of that. Hey, I love Kansas City. I want to be here. Yeah, and so that was surprising. He went to a AFC rival, the Broncos. Although, are they a rival if they haven't beaten the Chiefs since 2015? Yeah, that was the last time the Royals won the World Series. Think how long ago that was. Crazy. But I also thought maybe that was the best contract he was going to receive. I was still thinking maybe a team. I kept saying a team in Florida. Other than a team like Jacksonville, who is trying to get that playoff DNA, right? They won a game last year in the playoffs in a bad division. They're probably going to make the playoffs again this year. Do they want that playoff performer on their team? Does Miami? They already went after Tyreek Hill. Do they want another veteran piece? Were they going to offer a 2-year, $12 million deal? I thought that might be in the range for Frank Clark, but he chose a 1-year, $5.5 million guaranteed deal with Denver. What's your overall takeaway on this?
I think it makes a ton of sense for a lot of reasons. First, to this idea that Frank Clark had some like Chief for life kind of DNA going on. If you haven't heard the clips from him on Josina Anderson's podcast talking about the decision, everything that went into it, he talked about how Andy Reid will forever be his coach. Like we've heard little bits of those stories over the years of, both of them being LA guys and the things they've been able to connect over as men, football and otherwise. I mean, we've always heard that, and it always means a little bit, right? But hearing it on the way out when you're no longer incentivized to say things like that, because everyone's that way, right? I mean, like we were talking earlier about the hometown discount thing. And if anyone watching right now, if your boss walked in and was like, do you want to be at this company for the next 10 years? And you say no, no one's saying that. No, even if it's very true, no one's saying that. But so for Frank Clark to be out of the building and saying all the stuff that he did about the culture, the conversations, the honest and mature conversations he was having with Brett Veach, the honest and mature conversations he and Andy Reid were sharing, the mutual respect there is really not just real, but like tangible, like almost obvious when you listen to him talk. So that to me was just meaningful because I think it's actually maybe the best little window we've seen into what makes the Chiefs front office successful, the coaching staff, all of that. We very rarely get that kind of honest little peek in. So I appreciated that from him.
Yeah.
In terms of the deal, go ahead.
I was going to say, when we look back on Frank Clark, too, it's such a fascinating story. And I talked about it with Adam Best on the podcast. I think it was last Wednesday. We said, who's going to be remembered more fondly as a Chief? Not their careers. It was Tyrann Mathieu or Frank Clark. Now, Tyrann Mathieu's the better player. There's no denying Tyrann Mathieu's the better player.
Wow. And I pretty instantly went, Frank Clark for sure. And I don't know if that's true or not. That's a good question.
I said Frank Clark, and I was pretty adamant. I said, when you look at those videos 20 years from now, those hype videos, right? Who are you going to see? Tyrann Mathieu, who had 2 great years here, 2 phenomenal years here, and 1 average year here, or Frank Clark, who was average during the regular season at best, but then turned it on in the playoffs. You're going to see Frank Clark on the big screen at Arrowhead sacking someone to end the game. That's what you're going to see in a playoff game.
And when you look fairly or unfairly, Tyrann Mathieu has 1 ring. And currently, in an absolute fit of lunacy, I can say, having one ring does not make you special in Chiefs modern history.
Hey, Juju, that's great and all. You only got
It's
one
crazy,
guy.
though. But think about that. Think about how crazy that is.
And that's what's so funny to me is Tyrann Mathieu is the better player, but Frank Clark's the guy who'll be remembered more fondly in Chiefs Kingdom. And I do think right now in this moment, it's really easy to get up and say, well, that may be too soon, or, Frank Clark, does his legacy get tarnished at all going to Denver? But I don't think so.
Absolutely not. So, okay, I'm going to dive back in on the contract and on this idea of how much loyalty does he demand. Frank Clark got cut by the Chiefs. I think there's a ton of respect in that relationship. I think that they all love each other, and that Frank Clark will eventually come back and be a Chiefs Hall of Famer, Ring of Honor. Like, I really think he's going to end up getting that treatment to some extent. I don't know if it's going to be the highest levels of Chiefs honorifics, but he will retire a Chief, perhaps even, right? I think there's a chance of that. The Chiefs cut him. The Chiefs fired Frank Clark. And then the rival paper company, you got fired from Dunder Mifflin, and now Staples comes calling and is offering you $5.5 million guaranteed for 1 year of your service. Frank Clark would have been a fool not to take that deal. This is that stuff, and I'm really actually just really burnt by people who hold this against Jamal Charles. That's really where this anger is coming from. Jamal Charles was told he was done. They said, thank you for your legendary Hall of Fame run here. And yes, Jamal Charles should be in the Hall.
Yes.
Thanks for your service. Goodbye. Your knees are shot, whatever. And Jamal wasn't ready to be done yet. So he took the best offer that was out there, and it was the Broncos. Oh, but he said it was a great organization. Yeah, because you say nice things about the people who give you chances. That's a reasonable way to live your life. So anyway, all of that to say, not only is it $5.5 million guaranteed, probably a good $3.5–4 million more than the Chiefs would have offered, I would guess. Almost certainly the best offer he had on the table. And even as he said all that stuff about Andy Reid, Andy Reid's going to be my coach forever, all of this. The coach he had before was Pete Carroll, a bona fide, really good NFL head coach. Been doing it for a long time. Hear a lot of respect from players to him. It seems like his most strained relationship might be with Russell Wilson. And now he's not going to Nathaniel Hackett's team. He's going to Sean Payton's team. There is something there. You've got it. And I know that Chiefs fans have grown up hating the Broncos and the Raiders, and to some extent the Chargers. And I love that. It's great. Rivalries are awesome for sports. I am enjoying Chiefs Bengals as a budding rivalry where there's a little bit of venom both ways. I think it's awesome. But Frank Clark did not. They offered him the most money, and it will be a good environment with Sean Payton in charge. It's not going to be not going to be some total dysfunctional bleep show that derails the end of his career in the muck. Even if Russ stinks again, it'll be fine to be there. So no one should hold going to the Broncos against Frank Clark. If he would have said, Chiefs and Broncos made me the exact same offers, and I went to Denver because I want to hit Patrick Mahomes and screw that guy and screw the Chiefs and screw everything about him, then we'd be having a different conversation. But that's so far it's not what I've seen.
Flip that, Richard. Yeah, that'd be great.
Hey, look, I'm not. If the Broncos want to pay me $5.5 million to get blocked by Joe Tooney all day or whatever, I'll take it. I will perish. I'll be on the IR for ever after that. But Juwan Taylor can block me into dust. That's fine.
So here's from Pete Sweeney, the Chiefs mandatory minicamp day 1 roster report. The update here was Chris Jones, Turk Warden, because of his ACL. Yeah. They were not present. I saw, or according to him, Blake Bell, McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco, because of offseason surgery, and Trey Smith were not there. It did look like Mike Edwards, McDuffie, and L'Jarius Sneed were present, but without helmets.
Trey Smith is the only one that is a little weird to me because I just don't think I've got any other context for him not being there.
That was just what I saw from Pete Sweeney.
Yeah, that was kind of
that was earlier today, so we may have more of an update, but that's what I saw most recently. So
I interrupted you before you. I think we're going to ask a question, as I want to do.
I don't know, man. You and I just talk a lot. It's kind of what we do.
I was waiting to hear about McDuffie because he had been out, so it sounds like he's present. We knew the running backs. That makes sense. Which also, you want to pivot to a different little interesting topic, Stu? Because something interesting happened.
I would love to.
today we heard from Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the podium for the first time in a really long time. He was out there. We carried it on 810. And you mentioned Isaiah Pacheco, offseason surgery, and for him, it's just about getting healthy, hopefully for training camp. Jerick McKinnon has been on the injury report with one thing or another since 1997 and is an Iron Man, but that is an ongoing issue, right? Don't spit your water out there, man. Thank you. You've got electrical equipment in front of you. You can't go spewing. And Clyde, for all of the conversations, and I am going to divorce myself from the first round conversations and chats we had in 2020. At this point,
you just got married. Sorry, it's
no
too
divorces.
early to say divorce. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Yeah, Renee, come on.
No, I appreciate that. That's a really useful note. But even if the Chiefs were to trade Clyde for some sort of conditional draft pick, they could trade him and free up a couple $1 million per over the cap and eat about $1.5 million dead. If they were going to cut him outright, they'd save like less than $1 million and eat more than $2.5 million. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has some value to the Chiefs this year, and I think it's weird for me to feel like the only person saying that, but it's true. He remember the thing that Patrick Mahomes did where he was like running around for a long time and then like spun around and kind of just yeeted it right into the end zone. And there was a guy wearing number 25 who caught that touchdown and actually like had quite a few relevant big plays for the Chiefs last year, especially early on. Kind of a touchdown machine. Does know the offense still, despite not having outrageous physical tools. Like we're at a point now where it's obvious that that's not a great first round pick, and the process that led you there was not good either. But right now, the like anti-Clyde hysteria is kind of wild. He should be on this team. And if Prince ends up taking a larger role, that's fine. They can carry 4 running backs. They don't have a fullback on the roster right now. Clyde knows where to be. Like, I think there's some value there. Some, at least.
It's hilarious because you and I were king of why the hell are you drafting a running back? We talked about
I still got to get tased because I was so confident the Chiefs wouldn't do something so foolish.
Yeah, so Brisco still has to get tased by Seth Kaiser, if I'm not mistaken, who was the guy that told me to eat a cinnamon roll at your wedding before the wedding actually happened. And it got me in trouble. But
thanks, Kyle. I'm reading the comments, so thank you. Yes, Clyde should be RB1.
But you and I were on the forefront of don't draft a running back in the first round. We were on the forefront. We tried so hard to let people know that's not going to happen, guys. It's silly. There's no such thing as a luxury pick in the NFL.
Right.
But now we're also reasonable enough to say, hey, horrible pick, but it's a sunk cost. Yeah. He's on your roster. If he's your third running back on your team, that's not an issue. If he's ahead of even Jerick McKinnon because you're saving McKinnon for games that matter or the playoffs, that's also fine. Isaiah Pacheco is not going to run the ball on every single first and second down for Kansas City this year. You need other guys. I've also said I love this take, and I hopefully you agree with me. It's great when you have Christian McCaffrey, but does he make that much of a difference? One guy over having 3 or 4 guys who put up the same amount of stats, but it's spread out over 3 or 4 dudes. Because that's basically what the Chiefs did last year, was they don't have a bell cow, but they get to the same overall total numbers. And that's what really matters, because just because you have one guy do it, you still have roster spots taken up. You're not saving there's no one. You still have 3 running backs on San Francisco. It's not just McCaffrey and then, all right, that's 2 spots taken up now by a wide receiver and offensive lineman. That's not the case. They're still on your team. You just have one guy carrying the rock.
One little argument to I guess to the contrary that I found kind of interesting, at least, is the value of having a running back who can be on the field no matter the circumstances, just from like a personnel standpoint, right? Like the idea that this was the pitch originally with Clyde, is he can run the ball in first and second down and he'll be a deadly third down back and all that. And like Christian McCaffrey fits that bill, right? The issue, even when you have the elite of the elite and the outlier of the outlier, injuries still happen, and the Panthers offense didn't get any worse when he got traded. You saw a little bit of a burst from the Niners, who were such a weird outlier that I have a hard time evaluating them just in general. But like the Vikings just cut Dalvin Cook. His contract was the last one that was supposed to be different, right? So anyway, yes, I'm absolutely with you. And then you find out like, oh, when Dalvin Cook is hurt, our next 3 guys here can produce similarly, where there's a fine margin of difference between the at least the 4th running back in football and the 25th. And maybe some of those top few guys can at a varying time matter, be a needle mover on their own, but it's really rare. And even that window is very short. So yeah, I'm with you on all of that. And like Ronald says, Pacheco, McKinnon, and CEH plus Prince, good for this year. I think that's a really good running back stable. And frankly, I would rather have 4 guys that I feel like have some roles they can play and can be really beneficial, rather than one you're putting all your eggs in, because unless that guy magically doesn't ever get hurt, you're going to have to see running backs 2, 3, and 4 very, very soon.
Yeah. And I do think 4 running backs are most likely going to make the roster, because you're going to have Isaiah and Jarek. I think Clyde, as you mentioned, based on the contract, is going to be here. And they keep talking about Prince like Niall Davis.
Yeah.
That's a return man. That's your kickoff returner. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So you're probably going to
roster crunch game is going to be fascinating in training camp, though, because like there are like 9 receivers that you could make an argument for having a spot. A few of them are locks, obviously.
Amir Smith,
4 running backs, 4 tight ends. I'm not here to slander Amir Smith-Marset.
I'm not slandering. My point is I'm getting excited because I think Amir Smith-Marset season might be in effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you got a lot of skill position guys here that makes me wish that the roster went like 60 deep.
Yeah.
It's going to be weird this cut down season.
Well, let's talk about the wide receivers just quickly. You and I were at a very cool event. We were at Marquez Valdes-Scantling softball charity event for Humble Beginnings, giving back to the community. Really cool. First and foremost, I just want to give him a shout out and give Chiefs Kingdom a shout out. They raised over $200,000. They raised over $200,000 for a charity softball event, not for Patrick Mahomes, not for Travis Kelce, not for Chris Jones, not your big name guys. I mean, think about that. Everyone showed up, 6,000 to 7,000 folk for Marquez Valdes-Scantling. No, it's not like I'm trying to take a shot at him right now, but I'm trying to show how cool Chiefs Kingdom and how much impact they really have. Do you think, for example, do you think Giants fans are showing up for
Kadarius Toney's?
Well, but let's just say like Darius Slayton.
Right.
Do you think the Rams were going to show up for Allen Robinson?
No.
This is his second year here in Kansas City.
Right. No, I think your point is a great one. I was just checking. It looks like capacity for baseball is about 6,500, and I think there were some people just standing by the end of it. So I think it was absolutely in that 6,000 or 7,000 range. And no, you are right. A huge portion of the team turned out, which was certainly good. Patrick Mahomes being there certainly helped. But no, I mean, if you went around most of the NFL and you said, and I guess right now in some form or fashion, MVS would be the Chiefs' #1 receiver, but that's not really. Last year, he would have been pass catching option number 3, right? And then you can kind of expand beyond that. But if you went around most of the rest of the NFL and you said, hey, the third pass catcher on this team is going to have an event like this, and a bunch of the team's going to be there, but are they all going? How many people are going to come out for that? And I know we're taking shots at the city at the moment. Maybe Cincinnati, who has a ton of energy right now, and Joe Burrow has that star power, and that it's T. Higgins's charity softball event. Maybe. But what Kansas City did just in that one relatively small example of this being a fundamental truth, totally embraced it, totally embraced him. And just said, we are not yet completely done celebrating how great this championship team has been. We're excited for 2023. And Kansas City just likes supporting not just winners, but the teams and players that put energy back into the city. Like, not to take a pot shot at the Royals right now, but when the Royals were on the path to back-to-back World Series berths, you were seeing a blue Royals hat. That blue and white KC was every step along the city. And in these recent years, as they have kind of fallen to, at this point, borderline irrelevance, to be harsh, and maybe kind, the Chiefs are the heartbeat of the city in so many ways that fans are excited to have a chance to watch them play softball, mostly pretty poorly. Like, that's awesome.
Fallen is a very kind word for what's gone on with the Royals. Fallen, that's about as nice as you can put it. But no, and I think it's a good point. Chiefs fans and Chiefs Kingdom, they're very giving. They're very supportive. I think even of other teams, even like KCDC says, I'd be willing to wager, I don't know if 90% did, but a lot of Chiefs Kingdom gave at least $13 to Allen's charity. Remember when that was going on?
Yes.
Like you might have a rivalry with teams. End of the day, Chiefs fans seemingly give back more than others. And I don't know there's a study that's been done on this, but it does seem, and maybe it's the Midwest. I mean, frankly, some of it might be just the Midwest. I think there's a lot of good people.
And I do think in a lot of cases, sports bring that out from various spots, geographically or whatever it may be. When you to use the Bills again, you think about everything that surrounded DeMar Hamlin. That was just, terror that everyone witnessed all together watching Monday Night Football together. To what fan base in the NFL was more scared and more excited for the beginning and end of Alex Smith's story and everything else that came with that. I mean, Chiefs fans were live tweeting through the E60, kind of telling that story like it was a game, because everyone was really invested in Alex Smith's health, and we all got to see how bad it got before it got better. I mean, there has just been, again, that's why I kind of end up, I think, just stumbling into the idea of teams and things that put energy back into the city, because it really does sort of pull at those communal strings that tie all of us together. And it is simultaneously sometimes the corniest thing you can say about sports, but I think a lot more often it's the most important thing you can say about sports. Everybody can watch, their favorite golfer or tennis player or whatever alone in their basement and keep it all to themselves. And you can enjoy the competition, but being able to connect with everybody else, that's really where it comes from.
Going back to the event itself, you can see it with the players, how excited they were.
Can I cross promo something for us both here real quick? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Of course, baby.
The full show that we did, the entire Josh and Stu live from MVS's charity softball game, that whole show is published now on the Almost Entirely Sports podcast page. That's largely been kind of a catch-all for some things since I moved from nights to the waking hours with the Zone. But the Almost Entirely Sports podcast page has that full hour and a half show that is just as much, if not more, Creed Humphrey and George Karlaftis and Trey Smith than it is me and Sterling. But I would encourage you to check that out. I've tweeted it. I can go tweet it again after the show or something too. But it was really, really weird in a really delightful way. But don't listen to it now. Wait until we're done with this show first.
Yeah, wait, because it's awesome. But the players are so generous. They're so fun, and you can tell there's an excitement around it. You saw Willie Gay Jr. when the national anthem was going on, and the home of the Chiefs came down. I'm not trying to get into whether you think that what people's thoughts are about that actual situation, but Willie Gay Jr. was throwing his hands up and trying to get everyone going. I mean, you could just see the emotion. And I had a chance to talk with Rashee Rice, the Chiefs rookie wide receiver. And I asked him, I go, did you have any idea that was coming on, that home of the Chiefs? Do you have any? And he goes, man, I had no idea. That was incredible. Just the fun and the excitement and the emotion. And I told him, I said, look behind you, that's 7,000. Get ready for 10 times that. Yeah. He goes, I can't wait for Thursday. He goes, he can't wait for the NFL opener. He goes, he's never experienced anything like that, right? Going from SMU now to the NFL. And I was just talking, a lot of these young rookies, they're not, I don't want to say jaded, but when you've been around the NFL a long time, you get used to all this stuff.
Yeah.
You get used to being a celebrity. These young players, they're like, you want to talk to me on radio? You want to talk to me? Mahomes is over there. It's a really cool experience for these guys. You can just see the emotion. I've never seen someone more excited for the NFL season to start, just to show what he can do. I said, are you going to be nervous? He goes, first play, probably yes. After that, it's football. But that first play and seeing everything around, it's going to be crazy.
It's amazing. And a similar vein, slightly different way we got there. But when we were talking to Sky Moore, I said, hey, I want to get one serious football question in. I mean, you're going into year 2, Andy Reid's offense is notoriously difficult for rookies to really get their hands on in year 1. And all difficulties that come with that. So what was that adjustment like, and where are you at heading into this year? He said, look, just adjusting to the NFL is one thing. And I was coming from the MAC. It is a big jump to go from the MAC to Andy Reid's offense. And so for Rashee Rice, I'm keeping my expectations very, very tempered for him this rookie season, just like I did for Sky Moore last year. It was really a healthy thing to do. I would recommend it to anybody. If you get pleasantly surprised by a rookie, fantastic. But the Chiefs don't need to wait for Rashee Rice to like become the guy for their offense to be good, which is a great place to be in. And to see that excitement come through is really, really cool. Were you guys off to the side on that, or did that?
He sat down. I can't remember.
I must have handed off the headset, folks. We were throwing equipment around this whole show, so I missed that interaction, despite the fact that we were hosting that show together.
There was some random wildness going on.
I never spoke to Rashee Rice. I don't know where I was.
Yeah, I might
have been talking to Noah Gray. I don't know.
Players were coming and going. During the show, we started it. George Karlaftis wouldn't leave, and it was incredible. George Karlaftis is from Greece, obviously. He'd never played baseball or softball before in his life, and so we were rotating through players every few minutes. You'd sit down for a couple minutes, they'd move on, someone else would come up. Well, George Karlaftis, after my first goodbye, I was like, I'm going to hang out a little longer.
I checked this yesterday. The 4-minute mark of the show. You're like, George, thanks so much.
Yeah, go out there. He said, you're going to have to make me or something like that.
I'm not going back out there. Yeah.
He goes, I'm not going back out there. And when he says that, I go, all right, well, I'm not going to fight you, George. So George Karlaftis hung out for the entire first segment, which was 30 minutes long. I think
it was like the 24-minute mark that he finally was like, all right, I'm going to get my headset to Sky. I think it's where he handed it off to. Maybe
Karlaftis was there for a long time, and then Creed Humphrey came out and was talking, and Karlaftis begrudgingly said that Creed Humphrey is kind of a strong man, which I thought was hilarious. Willie Gay Jr. was there, but it was just a lot of fun that you and I had. Marquez, came by for a little bit. You said you have a Twitter photo, Richard. If you want to put that on the screen, if you are able to.
Yes.
There's Willie Gay Jr. on the left.
Smallest, because for me, I don't know how big Willie Gay actually is, but he was the guy who I think I was most like alarmed by the size of.
Think of a linebacker and think how quick Willie Gay Jr. moves.
Yeah.
Look at Brisco and me and look at our size. And that dude moves.
We're a little bit behind him. We're a little bit behind
him. A little bit, but exponentially quicker than me. But when Creed Humphrey, Karlaftis, and Willie Gay Jr. come over and say, hey,
6'1".
we want to do a show, those guys are doing a show.
Sorry. Is Willie Gay actually only listed at 6'1"? Because you could have told me he was 6'7", 900 of, carved marble. I'm like, yeah, that seems
checks
about
out.
Right.
He
made me feel very small.
You'd say seems low.
Seems a little bit low.
By the way, with Sky Moore, just to put it into perspective again, we always talk about his hands. Did give him a handshake.
Oh, I didn't.
He's got some Johnny Benji size mitts. I mean,
big mitts.
Oh, dude, those things are huge. I have pretty big hands. I got the Joe Burrow hands. They're 9 inches, right? We got a full-on 9 over here. Yeah, you heard me, Brisco. Full-on 9 over here.
So do I get to ask that things get clipped from this? Because if anyone wants to cut that and tweet it out later, Sterling to have a full 9 over here.
But these guys, it's so enjoyable to be around, and I don't think you see it with every single team. I don't think you see the excitement. I don't think you see the support. I don't think you see it with every single team, and I do think there's something special about Chiefs Kingdom and this Chiefs team.
I agree 100%. I also think it's a little bit of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, because Patrick Mahomes brings a whole other energy. And then Travis Kelce and his star rising in part, like hand in hand with his brother to the point that he's hosting SNL, coincides with the energy that fans bring to the team. And then the rest of the team finds that sees that energy from the fan base. And then the fan base gives it back to those guys as well. And it just becomes this cycle of good energy, incredible support, and all of the passion that comes with this fan base. It really is awesome.
So a couple of quick things when it comes to the Chiefs. And
it also hasn't been that toxic in a while. I feel like Chiefs, I don't want to jinx it. I mean, knock on some wood, but I feel like it's been a while since we had a really toxic stretch for like Chiefs Twitter or anything.
Well, the players too, to an extent, have stopped coming at the fans, which also I think helps a little bit too. It's probably a little bit of a two-way street.
It's probably a little bit of a two-way street.
Yeah.
Good point.
I want to point out too, we talk about OTAs a lot, and we understand Andy Reid does it old school and it's really difficult, and it's different than the rest of the NFL. So I talked to Richie James about that, which was cool for me since I was the big Richie James supporter before he came here. Asked him about OTAs. I'm like, hey man, what is it like for you? And he's like, it is old school. It is different. But he goes, if it helps win a ring, I'm all for it because Richie James has been in New York with the Giants. He was in San Fran with the 49ers. So he's been in some good organizations, but also some big cities. And I asked him, what's the biggest difference coming to Kansas City from East Coast, West Coast, now in the heartland? He goes, slower pace of life. Lot slower here, baby. But he seemed very excited to be here. He's now a veteran. If you look at some of the numbers last season, Richie James is now a veteran. And he's like, I'm ready to take that next step. Marquez Valdes-Scantling said, I'm now a veteran. I learned from Devontae Adams. I learned from Randall Cobb. I'm ready to take that next step. It's funny watching these young guys, maybe some unsung players. Now these dudes are the veterans in the locker room. George Karlaftis, for example, he's kind of now a veteran. I mean, you look at this offensive or defensive line, there's a lot of young players on. You look at the offensive line, Creed Humphrey, he's now a veteran in the NFL. Speaking with Karlaftis as well, we brought up Steve Spagnuolo because I tried phrasing it very delicately. But
you nailed this one.
Thank you. And I tried to bring it very delicately. I said, a lot of Chiefs fans, they have little issues with Spagnuolo early in the game. We know he's great in the playoffs. We know he's great in the second half. But is there a little bit of, is it like a boxer trying to figure out an opponent? First half, you're trying to see what they have. You're just trying to see what they're going to do. But then second half, you take it to the locker room, you see what they've done, and you use it against them. And he said, you know what? There actually is something to that. You saw it in the playoffs. You saw it against, I think, Tennessee before. I found it fascinating that, I don't know if he's necessarily saying that's what happens, but that he, an actual player, kind of goes, you know what? There might be a little something to that.
Yeah. I thought that was fascinating. I mean, yeah, it was just to have Karlaftis kind of just like, yeah, that makes some sense to me. I don't think it's necessarily an analogy Spags has used because of just the nature of, Karlaftis kind of letting it sink in and go, you know what? Yeah, I think so. And I think it's fascinating. And then he also went on to talk about, you asked about Joe Cullen and the relationship there and what that brought for him. Frankly, at this point, maybe it's because of Minihue and certainly FAU being the first round draft pick and continuing to kind of bolster that position. We've talked about Frank Clark and all. George Karlaftis is probably the guy we should be talking about a little bit more just in terms of his growth continuing. Maybe just from the standards of bendiness and all of that, he might not have the I guess intergalactic ceiling of the absolute elite bendy edge rushers, but he got better as last year went on, and he played from the very beginning. Like the Chiefs relied on him, seemed pretty happy to rely on him, and he never proved their faith wrong. So I think maybe it'll just be these sort of steps at a time. He got asked today in his presser about working with Tamba Hali, which did make me briefly furious at Friday, Josh, for not thinking about asking about that, because I talked to Tamba about all of that like a year and a half ago. It would have been a nice time to bring whatever. I knew they'd been working out. We saw those videos.
Dumbass.
I mean, you were there too. So one of us could have gone to the Tamba well. We both failed.
We dumbass.
But even that kind of stuff, if he just if he is improving his game by 10% every offseason or then 5 more as the year goes on or whatever it is, there's still real growth potential for him. And I think he's going to be a really nice player.
Yeah, that's the guy I keep pointing to. It's not Rashee Rice and it's not FAU. I keep pointing to Sky Moore and George Karlaftis as the two guys on the respective side of the ball is to take the next step. I keep saying Sky Moore, I think he leads this Chiefs team at receiver, not Travis Kelce, right? Travis Kelce, he's excluded from this.
Oh,
but
okay, finish this take. Let me hear this take again.
Sky Moore has the most receptions outside of Travis Kelce on this team. I think Sky Moore gets a lot of those underneath routes. I think they're going to try and use him. And maybe I'm completely wrong and misguided here. He reminds me so much of Deontay Johnson from the Steelers. He's the safety check down guy, very good intermediate route runner. He's going to get open because he is a great route runner. He's got great hands, so I don't think there's going to be a ton of drops. I think Sky Moore ends up not with the most yards, not with the most touchdowns from a wide receiver, but most receptions. That's what I'm going with. I'm not going to say it's going to be like 100 plus, but I think it's going to be more than MVS. I think it's going to be more than Rashee. I think it's going to be more than Kadarius Toney. Obviously less than Travis, but most for a wide receiver.
I don't dislike it. I thought you were going to say yards, and I was ready to come up with a counterpoint. But I think if he leads the team, anyone who leads the team in receptions has a great chance, particularly of leading them in touchdowns also. And so we'll see where that ends up. But I think your logic there holds. I might need to nitpick a little bit. I might need to, get the graph paper out for my final preseason predictions. But I definitely believe in him having a significantly larger role. And I think the Chiefs would love for him to be a souped up possession receiver. I think they'd be tickled with that.
So, and then when it comes to George Karlaftis, I think you're talking double-digit sacks. He had 6 last year. I think you're looking in
thrilled with double-digit sacks.
I think you're looking at 9, 10, 11.
9's only 1 digit, Sterling.
But I think that's the range you're looking at, 9, 10, 11-ish. I'm going to go ahead and say double-digit sacks, though. You're right. He was thrust into the starting lineup basically as a rookie. And that was why I was so high on Karlaftis coming out of college, was you could do that with him, and you can trust him to do that. The Chiefs needed a guy. They truthfully needed a guy. But I don't think they need FAU early on the same way they needed Karlaftis last year, which is a good thing. That's a good thing. But Karlaftis, as the season progressed, there's about a halfway point in the season where it looked like it just clicked. You see it with edge rushers all the time. You saw it with him. You saw it with Aiden Hutchinson. You saw it with Kayvon Thibodeau, right? It's just typically about a halfway point for edge rushers before it figures it out. I expect the same thing with FAU. But that already clicked for George. I think George is going to come out and have a really good year. Maybe the most sacks for an edge rusher on this team. That's probably not a hot take because Chris Jones is going to lead the team, but he's not an edge rusher. FAU's a rookie. Charles, he might be suspended. He might not. We don't know with that ongoing situation. But I'm really high on Karlaftis this year.
Here's a crazy thing also, because you know how much of last year was about all the rookies and newcomers, right? It wasn't just the rookie defensive backs. It was also Justin Reed just got here and all of that. This year, I don't think the number will be 0, but there is a chance that 0 starters in week 1 will have not been on the team the year prior. Defensively. Did I say it defensively?
You didn't. I'm going to say, where's Mahomes and Kelsey going, ass?
No. Guys who were on the team last year.
Oh, were on the team.
0 who were not. Because last year, like half that defensive lineup was totally turned over. And this year, Karlaftis, either Derek Nottie or Tershawn Wharton, unless Keandre Coburn takes that job, there's a chance. Chris Jones, Charles Omenihu could start and be new. FAU could start and be new. But if Omenihu is suspended, Mike Dana, guy,
baby,
could absolutely be a starting defensive end week 1. And then it's just about the rotation the rest of the way, not really about, who's getting more run or whatever. Willie Gay and Nick Bolton will be your 2 starting linebackers. Maybe Drew Tranquil is on the field for your opening reps. Leo Chanel is there from last year also, but we'll see who they end up actually trotting out there. And then Jalen Watson, Brian Cook, Justin Reed, L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Joshua Williams. Those are all guys who were here last year. And that was jogged. Did we talk about the Spags, the Justin Reed quote about the defense really snapping in after the Bengals game a little bit really late in the season? It was his presser last week sometime. And it had me thinking about just the effort that goes into learning a defense and recalibrating all of that for a new unit with new guys. That's not going to be the way this year goes. Maybe it's Omenihu, maybe it's Drew Tranquil. Maybe you have 2, no more than 3 guys starting this year who were not in the defense last year. And that's going to make life easier for them, I think.
Yeah, I keep saying this is going to be the best defense we have seen in the Patrick Mahomes era. I just think that the versatility this defense has is outstanding. Drew Tranquil is going to be the wild card. That was the one name I would have given you at least a little bit of pushback on. But again, it might still be Willie Gay Jr. I will say with Drew Tranquil, he was rocking number 23 in a white Chiefs jersey, and that looked clean, man. That was a clean-looking jersey. You don't see many linebackers rocking the Jordan number, but he did it and looked damn good. Also, shout out to KCDC gifting 5 memberships on YouTube. You badass. Thank you,
KCDC.
Appreciate that. Before we get out of here, Justin Ross
already.
I know. This is the first time I feel like you and I have not wanted to get away from each other quicker. Normally, we're like, all right, dude.
Being in separate locations helps.
That's true. You don't get to see
to ask me a Justin Ross question.
My caterpillar. Final two.
Just close my eyes here, Ted Lasso. Go ahead.
I've been hearing so many Justin Ross things. We've been seeing a lot of Justin Ross in the chat. See Chris Albright talking about Justin Ross. We had a question earlier talking about Justin Ross. Where are you at this point when it comes to Justin? That's Brisco throwing his hands up in the air saying, I don't want to get yelled at by everyone in the chat.
No, it's really not even that. It's really not even that. And thank you for narrating for the audio only listenership. I just have my arms outstretched. It's kind of a shrug emoji now. You can clip that too. That'll be useful, I'm sure, for somebody on Twitter. The hype is great and totally fine. And I am unbothered by it. I am no way whatsoever am I like, oh, we got to slow down this hype train. We're having too much fun. It's June. Whatever gets you through June as a football fan, bless you, bless it, take it with you. I just think it's a really crowded receiver room. Like there are years where he would legitimately be a must be on the roster type of guy. There would have been years where John Ross would have been the fun name going into training camp. I get it. I understand the appeal. I think the stuff we saw at Clemson was real. I think the skill set is deeply appealing. I think he absolutely has a path to be on the Chiefs roster this year. And then it continues to be about the longer development process of it all. I think if he makes the roster, you got to treat him like you would Rashee Rice. But the problem is, how many redshirt rookies are you going to be able to have? If he does not make cutdowns and the Chiefs are able to keep him on the practice squad, they would do it in a heartbeat. I worry that another team might say, we're going to go ahead and take that actual payoff, the shot at the payoff there. We're going to take that from you. But do you have a number in mind for how many receivers the Chiefs are probably going to roster?
I always say 6, but I find myself talking myself into 7, and I don't like it.
Let's explain why. MVS, Tony, Sky, Rashee Rice, all 100% on the roster. 4 locks. Justin Watson, just signing him to a deal. There might be a little bit of flexibility, but he got a lot of playing time last year. Richie James, bubble type of guy.
No, you say Richie James right now, okay? Don't you dare.
I said Richie James.
No,
guy.
Not bubble. Richie James is the GOAT.
I like the rules. I know you love him. I'm excited for him.
No, I'm with you. I think personally, my opinion, I think Richie James and Justin Watson are a little bit in the same category. That's my personal preference. Maybe you have the affinity for Justin Watson over Richie James. I think Richie James actually brings a little something different than Justin Watson. I think Justin Watson last year, I keep pointing to what MVS did last year. MVS, when his snap share went down, who's went up, it was directly dependent on Justin Watson. So Watson and MVS, their skill set was very similar. I think Richie James brings something different to the equation, as well as a little bit more of a gadget role type of guy as well. I digress. You go on.
Well, then you have Justin Ross, John Ross. We're at 8, and that's before you get to Cornell Powell, Amir Smith-Marset, the kind of the rest of the group at that point. But, and this is the comments are on this too, but like the end of roster battle at wide receiver is, I think, probably the most interesting battle going in the training camp. And I really don't know how it's going to end up. So that my actual take for Justin Ross is that right now he is Schrodinger's wide receiver. He is both on the roster and not. He has both made the team and been cut. It will be about what we see when we actually observe him. And until we observe him, we will not know for sure. Because the other part of it, this is deeply unfortunate, but there are 3 outcomes for Ross at this point, for Justin Ross. It is make the team, get cut, or on IR. Those are all out there. And if he gets hurt again in camp, they'll IR him and we'll try this thing again next year. If he does show that he can be a part of this offense in the next 2 years at a level beyond Richie James, maybe beyond Justin Watson, but I just think it's going to be really hard for the Chiefs to let go of a guy who they trusted to run some routes last year. If he can jump those guys, I think there's a chance, and he could absolutely be on this team. I just think it's still a legitimately difficult path.
I love that Ronald said, wow, a physics reference. Yeah, we're not used to having smart people and smart takes on this show.
It's technically a psychology reference, I guess, right? I mean, would it really be physics? I don't know.
That's close enough.
I just whatabouted a compliment. I mean, that to me is
congrats.
the height of snootiness.
All right, before we get out of here, the last final thing we're going to do, we do a thing called the must list, all right? So you come up with something that you want people to either watch, listen, or read. It's a must list, something kind of fun here. Richard, get your ass in here.
Boom. Good to see you, fellas.
Hi, Richard. I love your setup. I said this before the show also, but I'm just really, I'm honestly sick of Sterling, very into Richard.
Yeah, I'm sick of Sterling too. So
Yeah, I'm sick of me too. If I could choose one of us, it's definitely Richard. I mean, he looks like a guy who would have thrived in the 70s. Like Richard in the 70s would have been what a thing. He would have been a record producer, guaranteed.
The
really
keyboard
cool.
the keyboard back behind you is a really really deeply powerful aesthetic choice. In addition to, I imagine, being used by you.
He would be like, all right, guys, there's a great new band. It's Led Zeppelin. Like that's Richard right now. Yeah.
Your kids are gonna love it.
That's what you're not ready for it yet, but your kids are gonna love this.
All right, Richard, I'll let you go first. What do you have for this week's must list?
All right, I'm going to recommend a show I've been half rewatching and kind of finishing called Animals. You'll find that on HBO, or as it is now called, Max. It's a cartoon show about animals that live in New York City, little vignettes, kind of just them living their lives. So you got like a bunch of dogs that are hanging out in one of those parks in Central Park, and they're just trying to like plan their Steve McQueen-esque Great Escape. You know, you got mobs hanging out in front of a nightclub, you know, getting drugged up on the neon lights. It's funny stuff like that. It's retro scripted, which is a kind of format I like. Like The League did that, you know, where you got like improvised dialogue going over a plot. Really funny stuff. If you just need a cool little cartoon to watch, check out Animals.
This is the best recommendation I've ever gotten from anybody. I've never seen a tidbit of this, and I am now on the IMDb page, and this feels like it was made for me.
I think Animals got overshadowed by BoJack. They came out at the exact same time, so people were watching BoJack. Good show, but Animals was overshadowed, and it was it's very fun. Just 3 seasons of like simple, stupid, improvised cartoon comedy.
Yeah, Brisco loves animals. He literally has possums that live with him.
That they're not possums with me right now. We had possums for the winter. There's a real. I don't think I'm going to show my feet on the stream right now because that costs extra. But while we were on our honeymoon, Renee and I both got pigeon tattoos. So the aesthetic appeal of animals continues to get to me.
Shout out to Tungsten. Says Richard always says hi to me. Goose doesn't. So Richard's the king.
What's up, Tungsten?
Tungsten, I apologize. Hi to you, man.
Hey, Tungsten, if I could get second place in your personal power rankings, I would really appreciate it. Shout out to Tungsten.
Oh, I'd put me third, maybe even fourth. I might even put me fourth. I might
never go full Rex Ryan. I will keep my feet down here. Unless you want to gift a few more subs, anybody.
All right, Brisco, what do you have for your must list?
I unfortunately was underprepared because I love recommending music to people. But Renee and I just binged through the first 2 seasons of Only Murders in the Building on Hulu. It was very good. I didn't have much in way of expectations, not negatively. I just didn't really know what we were in for. It was really good. And there's a new Grandson album out called I Love You, I'm Trying that I just listened to a couple times through now. It's pretty hot and fresh off the presses, or at least I just found it. It's really good. My recommendation just for Richard is Joe, DJO. That's the artist name. His album Decide was one of my favorite albums of 2022. And I just feel like there's a pretty good chance that Richard's going to enjoy it. I don't know. I'm just my pitch to Rich.
All right, I'll check it out. Joe.
I'm going Led Zeppelin 2. I just bought the album. Actually, I took it from my dad because he had 3. And I go, we're making an album wall of albums in my living room, which is kind of neat. So went and picked up Rumors by Fleetwood Mac from my girlfriend. She's a big Fleetwood Mac gal. I'm a Led Zeppelin fella. And I almost picked up Led Zeppelin and Rush, but I don't think she'd have been thrilled if I come home with 2112 by Rush instead of Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. So I figured I can choose one. I went with Led Zeppelin 2. Whole Lot of Love. Moby Dick as a drummer is absolutely badass. I think Ramble On's on that album as well. Led Zeppelin 2. That's what I'm going with. I also love that Led Zeppelin just went with Led Zeppelin 1, Led Zeppelin 2, Led Zeppelin 3. I think they went Led Zeppelin 4, and then they went with like Coda. They just decided to keep just going with their own name for a while, and I appreciate that.
You eventually got to commit to the Roman numerals. You know, you're under the Super Bowls problem at 50. It's just it's a lot to deal with.
You know, they went.
I've also been playing the new Zelda game finally, and I'm just not good enough at video games to be very good at that. But I have found the fun finally.
Well, Brisco, this was fun.
This was great. We only did 1 hour.
Yeah, it was actually 1 hour and 9 minutes. I know you and I.
I can only talk in 4-hour chunks now, so we're gonna have to keep stretching this thing.
All right, so
Is there an outro for this, or what? You seem really confused with
No,
show's got in, dude.
I was saying we're going to talk for 4 hours. That was my point. I was
that's
making a
fun. Can I
joke.
keep recommending music and stuff? I don't.
And that's enough time we have today. Arrowhead Addict Podcast. Brisco, actually, thank you so much.
Hey, the Front
man.
Bottoms just announced their new tour and album also. That's really exciting.
If you want to hear about that, follow him on Twitter at JB Brisco. No E.
No E.
Yeah.
Brisco, no E. And if you add an E, I'll send you to Sterling.
Yeah. So Josh Brisco, JB Brisco, you can listen to him on Sports Radio 810 WHB from 10 until 2 with Jason Anderson on The Zone. It's a great radio show. I enjoy coming on every once in a while as well. So make sure you check out Josh Brisco. Richard is the GOAT producer. He's the man. Best hair and best stash in the game.
Yeah.
You better believe that pains me to say. As a man who takes pride in his hair, in his stash, while Briscoe's looking like a 1997 emo band.
Yeah, that's kind of my
Good look.
Go listen to Sugar Colton 741. But until next time, this is the Arrowhead Addict Podcast. We are out.